Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're going to give the rest of the attendees another minute or so to join us. But while we wait, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Number one, all audience members are muted throughout the session. So if you have any questions or any technical difficulty, please use the question function on your Zoom toolbar, and I'll help you via chat during the presentation. Second thing, the session is being recorded and will be available later, so feel free to fully focus on the content today. Finally, we've included time for a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So please submit your thoughts and questions throughout the presentation so we can have a lively discussion at the end. We'll be back in just a minute once everyone is joined, and we'll get started.
Are you bringing me back on?
Yes, you're on right now, and then I'll.
Yeah, but I have no picture. I just had don't cut your meeting short. Get more done.
Is your video on? I can see you.
Yeah, but I don't see you. Am I supposed to be seeing anything?
No, my video is not on.
No. But I'm just saying. All I see is an advertisement for Zoom. I hear you. I know my video's on and see the light, but I don't see any screen or anything.
Okay, I can see you. If you don't have, you're gonna share your screen when you're ready. So.
I'm ready anytime you are.
All right, well, we have had everyone join so far, or a good amount, so we'll get started. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's virtual summit. My name is Alex Weitzel, and I'm the Content Marketing Specialist at CourseKey. For those of you unfamiliar with us, we're a mobile attendance tracking platform used on more than 80 campuses across the country. We're very excited to be facilitating today's events and hope you'll attend as many as your schedule allows. For the next hour, we'll be hearing from Seth Kaplowitz on the topic technology's role in the classroom. Seth is an attorney and a former lecturer at the Fowler College of Business at San Diego State University. We're looking to have a lively Q&A discussion at the end, so please ask questions throughout the presentation if you have any. And finally, we will end this presentation at 10:55 to honor our commitment to bringing you this content in under an hour. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to pass the mic over to Seth. Seth, how you doing?
Thank you very much, Alex. Good morning, everybody. I wanted to approach this session from the standpoint of the using technology in a classroom for purposes of engaging the student, but more importantly, trying to have the students engage the world. Most of my work is in the international arena, and with that, it's so important to provide perspective to students in a classroom or elsewhere of how students like them are approaching issues that they see in their lives, and in an attempt to, one, give our students a frame of reference as to like how their life is versus how somebody else is living their life. And when I first started trying to do this, it was sort of difficult, but now with the advent of a more stable Skype platform and technology like Zoom, it's easier to have a one-on-one or even a class-on-class excuse me, engagement for that purpose. Now, just to give you a little background on myself, I do still teach at the Fowler College of Business. I am in Tacoma, Washington now, but I teach the online courses that I developed while I was on the full-time faculty of Fowler. I now work in Washington State, and I'm still pursuing my international teaching and mentoring programs. I spend a lot of my time working with entrepreneurs, startups. Began with many years ago as an entrepreneur myself, but started to work with the Zip Launchpad that was at the San Diego State. And in working with people that are have ideas and are trying to translate those ideas into a monetized platform, there's a lot of frustration that's developed. Any of you that have participated in any kind of business know that things just don't always go as planned. And one of the biggest concerns is if you ask a student, what is your biggest concern? It's fear of failure. And so much of what we try to do as teachers is to reframe what failure is. And I try to look at it from the standpoint of, yes, failure is real. When you try something and it doesn't work, you failed at it. But when I try to teach the students or have them try to adopt a new way of looking at it, is that failure is just steps along the way to success. Because if you try something and it doesn't work, yeah, you failed, but that doesn't mean that your idea isn't any good. And one of the ways that you can work with students about that fear of failure is to have them connect with students around the world in entrepreneurial settings that have that same experience, and they can share ways in which they can get through it. So one of the big startup incubator programs is run in Berlin, Germany by the Siemens. And San Diego State has a relationship with the Berlin School of Economics and Law. So I join their classes via video. They join my classes during video. So our students can have a dialogue between like what's going on in the entrepreneurial community in Berlin versus what's going on in the entrepreneurial community in the United States. That's one use of technology. Blackboard is another use of technology. We look at it as a meeting house for all of the things that are going on in a particular class. But a professor or an instructor in a class needs to step outside of Blackboard. They need to look and talk to their students. And that's one of the big things here is what technology can you use in a classroom or anywhere that will be delivering information to the students in a way that they want to hear it. Now, a lot of people, when they're like in a situation like this, would be paying attention to what's being presented, but at the same time, they're multitasking. They're looking at, or they're typing, or they're messaging, or they're doing other things. So what is it that you can provide a student to have them say, ooh, I like what's going on here? And one of the best ways to do that, in my opinion, is to use newsworthy examples. Most of the students that I come across do not read a newspaper. They don't listen to the news. And when I ask questions about, well, have you heard about this? They look at me like I had 6 heads. So in my business law class, it's sort of easy to find relevant newsworthy topics that I can show clips from YouTube or the news, or I can show articles that are in the newspaper to try to stimulate a conversation. One of the things I do in my class is I have students read newspapers from other countries, the English version newspaper of, let's say, the Shanghai Daily News or the uh, uh, South China Morning Post or Pravda, or there's a new periodical called The Correspondent that has just launched. It's completely reader supported, and it's based in Amsterdam, so communicate with them. Snopes, wanting to use that for fact checking when students ask a question. So you say, well, is that true or not? You can go online and call up Snopes.com and insert the question, and in real time you can have a talking point, and you can also get what is the relevant truth to whatever the topic is. Any topic that you want to present can be presented in this way, and I think when you're using technology, one of the best ways in which to engage your students is to tell them a story. Create a story around what it is that is taking place. And so if you wanted to use something, let's say, in the news from this week, if you wanted to take the situation that are taking place with the Kurds in Syria, and that between Turkey and Syria and Russia, there's just so much relevant information. You can say, okay, here, these are the undisputed facts. Here is what the right is saying. Here's what the left is saying. Here's what the center is saying. And you can emphasize that by, once again, going to another online platform called Allpoints, allsides.com. And Allsides takes a objective review of how all sides of a conversation are being discussed in the world. So why do I take the time to do this? Because it's important for the students to be able to formulate their own opinion. And if we only give them one side to the story, then they basically are being brainwashed. We want independent thought. We want creative thought. We want critical thinking. We want students to be able to step away from themselves, to be objective, to look at what is going on in the world, and to be able to formulate an educated, well thought out position. How else can they get through the noise that's out there without having relevant information? And as instructors, it is our job to make sure that the information that's being presented is relevant. I do not use PowerPoints. If I use a PowerPoint, it's purely to run in the background. I want to talk to the students in some way, shape, or form to try to bring out what they're thinking, what are their concerns, and lay them out on the ground. So the three things that I wanted to cover today were what technology can use to achieve your objectives, and the approaches to integrating technology in your classroom, and creating themes. And so the themes aspect of this is what I was just talking about, having the ability to tell a story. It's hard to tell a story, especially if the information that you're telling a story about is not interesting. but it's necessary, it's theoretical. So the only way you can, at least in my mind, the only way you can take dry theory is if you take a fact pattern, hopefully pulled from real life, where you can show how these things uh, are created, to show how the story aligns with the theory that you want. So one of the things that, one of the courses that I teach is negotiation. And, the, and because of my international focus, I became very focused on international cross-cultural negotiation. International cross-cultural negotiation requires another step. What is that step? Understanding the culture that you are dealing with. Now, most American students think that everybody in the world is like them. They think that everybody has the same access to the things that you want. Well, in Mexico, for example, I was just at a meeting yesterday in Mexico where they want to build a school in a fishing village on the east coast of the Baja called El Datil. There's about 20 families, and the kids have no school. They live in a shack. There's no running water or electricity. Everything is done by solar power. They're off the grid, but they have no education. And so there's an effort to put a school there, and have a teacher dedicated to that community so that the children can start to learn in school. Most students don't understand that that is what is existing in the world. And what I find is that making those connections makes the students curious. And that's really all you need, is to have a curious student that likes to ask questions. Now, that goes to the next issue in a classroom, students' comfort level. Now, when you're in a small class, it's usually more conducive to having a conversation. But if you have a class of 100 students, getting students to ask questions is very difficult, at least in the classes that I've taught. And so CourseKey, as an example, in their platform, they make life not only easy to manage the classroom in terms of attendance and giving pop quizzes and things like that, but they also foster communication between a student that is shy and that of a classroom. So with the widget on CourseKey, you can in real time show the questions that the students are asking to the class, and then thereby you'd be able to address a concern of a student without that student feeling intimidated by raising their hand. Reaching out for doing that is important, but there's always a sacrifice. If you have a 15-minute class, there's only so much time you can spend going back and forth between technology presentations and an actual lecture. So it's really important to spend the time to put this thing together. So this is how I do it now. I tell the students right up front, I flip the classroom. I tell the students right up front, here's your reading as homework assignment. You're going to do it. That's your responsibility. That's your job. When you come to class, I'm going to focus on the most important issues in that chapter, but to understand those issues, you need to have read the chapter. And that's what I do. I don't come into class and regurgitate what that chapter said. I take what the topic that chapter is trying to focus on, and I just load that up with real life examples to show or to present to students ways in which they can discuss amongst themselves or in the class, or just even if they think about what the topic is and how it works. And 9 times out of 10, it is a very effective way to get students to say, I didn't want to pay attention to that. So maybe once a week, I will do a current events download at the beginning of class, just to sort of lay the land and go from there. So like, I'll give you an example. In a law class, business law class, I can focus on what's going on in the real world that impacts law. We can talk about the Supreme Court. We can talk about the cases that are going to go before the Supreme Court. We could talk about any legislation that's before Congress. We can talk about what impeachment is. We can talk about how impeachment comes about. Now, what I found was that the students coming in to college in their sophomore and junior year have a really lousy background on the Constitution and what thinking went behind the creation of the Constitution. And so how do you explain to students why things are this way if they don't have things in context? So I spend a lot of my time giving context to the information that we are presenting in class. In my negotiations course, we'll focus on culture, and we will do simulations. And so with that, I could use any platform that was created for doing strategic gaming. And so I can bring in strategic games to teach how to think. So one of the things that I've incorporated into my teaching is something known as design thinking, which is really a way for groups to problem solve, to learn how to problem solve together. And it is it takes the students out of a traditional classroom thought process and puts them into a creative thought process. How do we come to this point without having made the connection to why this actually exists? I see a question here.
Yeah, Seth, I was going to reserve the questions for towards the end for the question and answer session.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
Generationally, you have a lot to deal with. Okay, so students coming into a college classroom straight from secondary school have a different perspective than students coming into the classroom having just served in the military. Those students are the military veterans or active duty that are taking classes while they're based in the States are right up in front. They are serious. They're there. They're there to learn. They're disciplined. And I make use of those students to explain their journey, how they went in this direction, to try to give the students that have no idea of how things are transpiring, kids that don't know from that type of an experience, for them to understand where they fit in. Students, even though we know or we're told that we have a great economy, students are worried about getting jobs and being able to survive. And until such time as you can begin to make them feel more self-confident, they're always going to feel that they're not on secure ground. So the information that we give them has to make them energized to go forward, and it's not easy. Every class, you can't have students running around saying, "Oh, this was the greatest class in the world." It's a layering effect. Every topic is a layer cake, is another layer to a layer cake. And the full picture isn't presented until all of those facts and figures are laid out in an organized and understandable manner. And so the way I learned is so different from the way I teach. And I'm constantly trying to communicate with my students to find out, what do they want to see? What is it that they want to, what is it that they want to learn? What is it, how do they want this information presented? So it's video, it's Instagram, it's, forget about email. They hardly read their emails, or at least that's my experience. I said, "Oh, I sent you an email." And "Oh, I didn't see it. I didn't check my emails for a week." But so I opened a Twitter account, and I had a Facebook for the class, and tell them, "You want your information? It's on Blackboard. It's in the syllabus, which everybody should have, but you could also find out all this information on Twitter, and you can find this information out on Facebook, and in some cases you can find it on Instagram. And any which way to get the student to realize that you're there as a resource. You're not there as a person to talk at them. You're there to help them and to help them work through issues in a very mentorish type way. And whatever works for you. You can't, if you're not comfortable with it, then don't do it, because the students will know that you're not comfortable doing it. Find a platform that you're comfortable with, and then just learn to master it. YouTube has unbelievable how-tos to try to work through different things. And the technology departments at the schools are there to help you integrate. But what I find out is that I present a theory, whatever the topic might be. I give them newsworthy events, either historical or current, that illustrate how that issue is appearing in real life. And if that issue is resolved, then to show how it was resolved over time. It's important, no matter what topic you bring to a class, that that topic is one that needs to be presented, that it's part of a chain of information, so that in the end, it's part of the bigger picture. And so storytelling used with technology is an unbelievable way to maintain the attention of the students. Another way is when you are in the classroom. I don't know how many of you have large classes or not, but generally in large classes, a lot of students are not really paying attention. They're on the computer, surfing the net or on Facebook or doing whatever it is. One way to engage those students is to ask them to, in real time, look something up. Hey, do me a favor, see if there's anything new on this topic. I saw it in the news this morning, maybe there's an update. Reaching out to the students on their level is the key to having them want to tune in. So I just need to get something to drink. Anyway, I'd be happy to take some questions. I have to tell you that I just love teaching. To me, every day is something new, because there's just so much going on in the world that can be brought into a classroom for purposes of fleshing out topics. And to the extent that I try to learn new things with different technological programs, the one thing that just constantly gets reinforced to me is that the better storyteller you are, the more connection you will bring about in a classroom.
All right. Hey Seth, are you good to open it up to questions right now?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. So to our audience, I'll give you some time to submit any questions that you might have. While we wait for them, Seth, I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of touched on it already by asking students in class to maybe look something up that you mentioned, using their own devices.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering how you kind of balance that fine line between students bringing their mobile devices to class and having them be a distraction versus a useful tool, and how you kind of stay onto the side of being a useful tool.
That's that's an issue that they have all the time. You're constantly wrestling with how do you do that. In a large classroom, it's really hard to patrol students that are using it. I run a paperless classroom, so my students need to bring their technology if they want to participate in class. That's where CourseKey comes in really well, because through the CourseKey integration system, the students can let you know that they're in class. They can ask you questions. You can quiz them at the beginning or at the end of the class, or both, on the topics that are covered. I generally use CourseKey. I would shoot off 3 questions at the beginning of the class that would cover their comprehension from the lecture before. And then at the very end of the class, I'll do 3 questions to see what their retention was on the information that we just covered. when I see a student obviously not paying attention, like they're laughing at something at the back of the classroom that shouldn't be laughed at based on what we were talking about, when we do that, that's when I call them out. I just say, excuse me, can you do me a favor and just see if what newspaper how's Los Angeles Times covering this issue? How is the New York Times covering the death of Elijah Cummings? It snaps them to the fact that they're not in their own little world, but two, now I've given them something that they're now contributing to the class. And that to me is the really the most important thing, how to get the students to think of class as something more than something they have to go to.
Right.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. And I think that's a really good way of handling it, by having them, when you notice that they're not paying attention, just having them do something to engage in the class instead of just calling them out and kind of admonishing them right on the spot.
Right. Another thing that I do is I walk around the classroom. I carry an iPad with me so I can have the CourseKey widget, but I walk around the classroom in an effort to make eye contact with the students. And a lot of times when I'm approaching the student in the class, because I'm so close to them, they feel more comfortable asking a question than they do if they had to shout the question from, the fourth row back to the front of the room.
Right.
So that works also. So let's see. We have one attendee. How have you seen students react to using tech in class over time? Have they been more open to it as the generations go on? Absolutely. The students are totally tech-centric, and there are just so many apps that they use. So the only way you're going to really find out is to talk to them, to ask them, like, what apps do they like, and see if any of those apps can be integrated into your class. I have another class. This information is great. I work on this way of educating every day. What is the best way to get your teammates, other educators, on board with this? It depends on who your teammates are. If you're dealing with tenured, sedentary, I don't want to do anything new type of individual, feel sorry for your students and don't waste your time. Any of the newer graduates that are going into education, they're completely on board with this. They know how to do it. So the best way, I think, to maybe find out how you can encourage other teammates to do it is if you either yourself or by going to your tech support and have them do a lunch and learn or a breakfast or something like that, where they can introduce the different types of technologies that are available. And, it's all in the presentation. If you make something understandable and approachable, you're going to get people much more willing to participate than if you just try to take the same old thing and put it on a technological platform. The technology gives you the ability to integrate different types of media to illustrate the point that you want to get across. When and why did you decide to start trying to use technology in your courses? I would have to say 2010. And the reason why I did is because I was in an entrepreneurial space, I saw the direction things were going in. And I, the one thing I knew was I hated the way I was taught. And I wanted to teach the way I wanted to be taught, the way I learned best. And so it's really because of the people that I met in the entrepreneurial spaces that started to turn me on to platforms like Asana and um, uh, LinkedIn and uh, uh, Facebook and uh, Twitter. It wasn't until I saw that people showed me how to use it that I is how I got comfortable. I was horrible at computer when it first came out. And like everything else, if you bite off a little bit at a time, you become comfortable with it, and then you go on to the next step. And now I've been doing it for 10 years, and I don't know how I would do it any other way. In fact, the um, the best review I've ever gotten uh, came the last 2 years because of the final exam I gave. In my negotiations course, I showed a movie for the final exam and then asked my students to analyze the body language and the negotiation styles of the 12 people that were sitting in a jury room. The movie was a great movie. It was 12 Angry Men. I don't know if any of you have seen it or not, but the reviews I got from it were like the best exam ever. And all I was trying to do was to have students look at something and enjoy looking at it and learn something from it. And as long as you can get students to pay attention, you're so far ahead of the game. If I haven't answered any of those questions in detail enough, or if I haven't answered them at all, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to clarify anything. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask after this webinar, please feel free to shoot me an email. I'd be more than happy to engage with you now, later, 5 weeks from now, whatever works for you.
Okay, yeah, let's give our audience a little bit of extra time to ask any last minute questions that they have. Seth, I really like your style of teaching, and I wish that my professors in college had been a bit more tech oriented, because I can imagine the students are far more engaged than some of the students that were some of my peers when I was in class, because we honestly saw a lot of our lectures as kind of a chore that we had to go through and try to retain as much information as possible from. And when you're just not engaged with the traditional like PowerPoint slide and trying to take notes on your own, your performance is just hindered by that. So I can imagine that students are performing even better because they're so engaged.
Well, one of the things is like, because I give my students the PowerPoints. Here, I post them on Blackboard. Here's a link to all the PowerPoints. I give them all of that information. I give them the links to where they can take practice tests, and I give them all of that so that I don't have to spend my time on that. Here, these are all your resources.
Mhm.
I'm going to give you context.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of the reverse classroom like you were talking about.
Here, there's another question. Just like you said, I have the reading PowerPoints, videos online for homework. I have discussion in classroom. How can I get students to like the online homework online more? Uh, I don't know what homework you actually are using online, but to be honest with you, ask your students. Nobody wants to do homework. So knowing that, maybe like what I do in one of my classes is it's a 400-point system. 100 of those points is homework. It's 100 free points. They can do the homework till the cows come home, until they get it all right. So they can get 100 free points. All they have to do is do the homework. And I can't tell you how that 100 free points is the difference between students passing or failing a class. So if you can make it so that they feel successful at the end of a homework session, that might help. But my first thing is ask the students, what about the homework don't they like, or what would they like if they have to do homework? What would they like to see, or how would they like to see it? Ultimately, you're the decision maker, so you can do whatever you want. But if you want students to pay attention, then you got to find out what it is that they'll pay attention to.
Okay.
Alex, I know you got to go.
We're slowly reaching time, so unless there's any other questions, we're going to wrap it up here. We'll give them about 20 seconds to maybe answer or ask any last minute questions. Seth, it was really interesting learning about your process, your teaching process, and I hope that more teachers will start to embrace using technology in the classroom, because like you said, a lot of these modern students are so tech-centric, and that's really how you're going to reach them the most effective way, I think. So it's really interesting to learn.
Yeah, it's like everything in life, it's trial and error. What works, you follow up on, and what doesn't work, you toss aside. And that doesn't mean that what you toss aside isn't going to work in another classroom. It's really based on the personality of the class.
Right. Okay, then we'll leave it right there. Thank you everyone again for spending part of your day with us, and thank you especially to Seth for your awesome presentation on technology's role in the classroom. Once again, it was really interesting to hear about your process, and I learned a lot, and I'm not even a teacher, so I can imagine a lot of these folks are going to be taking some of this information and testing it out on their own. So thanks again. And as a reminder, we do have 7 sessions in total today. So if you haven't signed up for any of the rest, you can register on our website, CourseKey.com. Also online, you can sign up for our mailing list to get alerts on all future content, including webinars, blogs, and other programming. Thanks again, Seth, and to our audience. I hope to see you guys again later.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Bye. Take care.